Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is Monday, September 23rd, 2024. You're listening and watching the Daily AI Show live. And today we're talking about what happens when you can start building your own apps with AI. What happens when you're able to get personalized apps delivered to you, maybe in the App Store, maybe in the Google Play Store. When AI gets to a point where it can be so personalized that they're actually apps being created on demand. And so we're going to dive into like what that future really looks like, what's currently out there today that gives us some hints about what might happen. And just generally have a great conversation about it. And with me today to have that conversation is Jimmy. Andy is Beth. Andy is Beth with us. Andy is back with us from Tokyo, and Beth is also here. And I'm Brian. So we got a good cast here to kind of break this down. And I don't know. I feel like I want to maybe throw it over to you, Beth. I know you're getting going here, but we were talking about this topic last week and saying like, hey, we really kind of want to dive into this idea. Carl, who might show up today, has also talked about this about when it gets more to the agent side of things, right? Like, well, what happens if there's 100 different apps and we're trying to do this, and maybe that perfect world of agents isn't so perfect in the future. But if we back up a little bit towards just apps and what a personalized app experience might be, or a DIY experience would be, what does that mean to you?
So I think the benefit of this approach is that each of us have individual, not just individual tasks that we need to accomplish with our jobs, but individual struggles, right? So individual challenges or individual strengths, right? So we could look at this as like lean into your strengths. You know something so well that you can automate it with AI and know that it's doing really well or not. That's a place for this. But the other piece is, what are you struggling with? So I've said often on this show that I find it hard to write without a question in front of me, right? And sometimes when I have an idea, I have a lot to say, and it's hard for me in that mindset to come up with the question. So I can, in fact, create an AI that does the interview for me, interviews me specifically, and then attaches it to, let's say, I have 5 marketing messages I want to hit periodically, right? So it attaches it to one of those. It knows what those are, and then it generates 3 examples, right? Like that is a relatively simple writing AI, but it's becoming much more comprehensive. And in fact, our colleague Aaron was talking about using O1 to do some of the planning for that kind of thing. So that's really what this is about. I think one of my marketing messages, I guess, I think one of the things that AI is best for is helping shine a light on our individual brilliances. And you have an opportunity now to customize the AI that's going to do that for you based on where your brilliance lies.
That's a great way to put that. So I know Jimmy and Andy, you guys have both been very, very hands-on with a project that we've sort of talked about on the show. We haven't delved into all that topic is. That's how I'm human talking to you guys. You haven't really gotten much into that topic, and we don't necessarily have to do that. But you guys obviously have been very in the weeds, head down, hands on the build out process. And you guys have told me about, I don't know, I feel like Figma has come up in conversations, and it's just a lot of stuff that I don't deal with, but you guys know it. So like, obviously, you know what it takes to build maybe an AI solution right now, and there's sort of parts and pieces to it. But I don't know, do you see this getting easier? Do you see this getting to a point where maybe the entire process feels a little bit like a really easy Replit or Cursor or even an O1 preview, where you're able to just fully explain what it is you're trying to build? And maybe this is eventually happening real time. What's your guys, since you have the expertise in this out of our group, what's your guys feel on that? Whoever wants to take it. Andy.
All right. So today, the process of developing an application is a multi-stage process. Any application that you want to build, you have to first define what the features and functions are. And most people who are looking to do a DIY application don't have any experience trying to anticipate what it is that all the functions are that have to be built into an app in order to do that. But AI is very good at that. So AI can take over that part of the process largely if you just give it a generalized prompt about what it is that you want the device or your assistant to do. And then there's the further step of generating the user interface and also the APIs on the back end to integrate with lots of other things. There's a wide range of personal applications that could be used, but most of us don't use a lot of personal applications. Now, just to rattle off a few of them, for example, there's financial management and tax preparation tools, travel planning apps, learning and development platforms, password management tools, mental wellness apps. AI-driven productivity tools include things like, Motion, meeting transcription tools like Otter, and so on. ChatGPT is one of the major ones, right? So we have an application that gives us access to an AI on demand, which is, a kind of application. Now, you can go on and on about the kinds of things that you might want your devices and or your assistants to do for you. But the question is, are you really going to do something on your own to develop an application that's customized to you and suited to you? I think it's, as Carl's just joined us, Carl's been making the point that eventually you'll have an agent which will be able to weave these things together for you. And so the sort of central application that you want to include in your DIY suite is going to be that agent who can actually nominate some of the things that could be automated for you in the form of applications. So I want to use the tax planning and or not planning, but so just tax preparation over the course of the year. If you do your own taxes, you have to collect lots of information in order to present them to either the application that's going to generate your tax return, or you're going to generate that information and deliver it to a tax preparer. So now imagine a future in which I'm spending money and I'm doing it largely from my mobile device. I'm no longer pulling out a credit card and putting it in, but having just returned from Japan, I can tell you it was very rare that I used an actual physical credit card because I was using the Suica app, which pays for almost anything anywhere. So I just hold my phone up to the place where you would normally insert your card. You have that experience with Apple Pay, for example, if you are an Apple iPhone user. But imagine now that there's an app on your phone like I have today, which is called Rocket Money, which seems to be tracking everything that I've got. And I actually gave it permission via APIs to go to every single financial resource I've got, every bank account, my investment accounts, everything else. So it brings all that stuff together. That was very easy. It was a few clicks and authorizations that I had to provide to validate that I allowed them to do that. But now it has access to all that information. And Rocket Money doesn't do tax preparation, but it ought to. And if my assistant could do the following, I would say, assistant, now, anytime I spend money at any time, I want you to determine whether that's something that could be included on any one of the tax forms or tax, income statements, if you will, that I have to report for Schedule C or for, a business that I run. I want you to separate those out and maintain those and generate a list of all those things. And then, by the way, also generate a year-to-date income statement for that particular aspect of my life. And all of those things could be highly automated. That's the future. And I think that really, for me anyway, requires that there be this agentic central assistant that will actually ask me, okay, do you want me to start to do this process? And then it'll generate an application, code it, and run it continuously in the background in order to collect and organize all those things. So I see that as the future, more likely than people saying, okay, now I'm a product developer. I'm going to do a product requirements document. I'm going to do it conversationally with my assistant. I'm going to tell it the kind of things I want in my app. That requires a developer's mind, I think, and maybe some experience generating applications. But an assistant could do a lot of that for you.
Yeah, I agree. I really wanted to expand upon that concept of, and I guess the theme of the show is the on-demand side of things, right? So because the compute is so fast and what's available to us, and if you've used ChatGPT to any extent, you can see that when you make certain kinds of requests, ChatGPT will actually build out the Python code to run and execute on, on your request. So let's expand on that a little more, right? So like Andy said, it's a matter of having whatever that central point is, whatever that agent is, and it's going to build what you need on demand. So right now, there's a whole bunch of different services and apps and things like that that are out there that you might be taking advantage of. And on the surface level, those agents are going to interact with all of those apps or services that you're using. But it'll come to a point where the goal or the end result is what your agent is going to build for you. You don't necessarily need service X, Y, or Z if all that service does for you is tax preparation or the multitude of lists that Andy went through. But it's about the end result. It's about that goal. So if you have your agent who can be that interpretation layer between you and what your needs are, then it can go through the process of planning out and building whatever apps you need to accomplish that goal. And I think that's where that next really important piece is. Right now, when we've covered things like Cursor and Replit and other coding assistants, that's what they are. They're much more improved than they were, a year ago, and they can fill in a lot of the gaps, but you still kind of need to know what to ask them. You kind of need to know what are the things that you're looking for. And if you have no clue, right, you need that agent who's going to, like Beth likes to point out, is use the agent to talk to you, ask you the question to build off of. And once it has that layer, then yeah, you don't need to go and say I need a app built or say I want to develop my own app. You certainly can, and all the tools will be there to help you do that. But I think that key turning point will be the, hey, what do you want to do today? Or, hey, I've noticed these things, what's going on? And so the concept of how getting AI into like our operating systems or on device, along that development line is going to help with getting past that initial hurdle, that blank page issue. So I'm really looking forward to the true on-demand of apps. You could apply this to websites, highly personalized, websites, apps, all those kinds of things, where it's just a matter of my agent knows the kind of things or how the way I work or how the way I think and what I'm going to need to accomplish a certain goal. And then for us, it's a matter of just determining, yes, that's the goal that I want to do, whether it needs to prompt us for that or I'm initiating that.
Yeah, I think there's a real chance of hypothetically waking up in the morning and looking at your Apple phone. I'll just use Apple as an example, but Android too. And your phone says, hey, Brian, good morning. Based on these 5 things, I've created 5 potential app frameworks for you. And it's going to look maybe something like the App Store, but these are bespoke, unique apps to me. And maybe they haven't even been created. Essentially, my phone is saying, I've identified that based on what you've done with this, and the data we have internally on the phone, and what is maybe coming up on your calendar, maybe I'm going on a trip, maybe it's coming up on Christmas season, and now there's the things that go along with the holiday season and planning and these kind of things. Maybe I have it earmarked on one of my calendars that we're going to be going up to Georgia or something like that, which is where a lot of family is. That's a 7-hour road trip. Sometimes we rent a car and do it just to have the space. Hey, if my phone knows that, to your point, Jimmy, it might ask first and then say, would you like me to basically create you this on demand? And then I definitely see a world where the coding is so solid without me having to touch anything. It will literally just build that in minutes. And just as much, it might break it down too. It may not exist beyond a certain date because it doesn't have a purpose beyond that. So not only is it on demand, but it's not even necessarily everlasting. It's not supposed to be evergreen. It may be just to solve a problem or solve a problem that I'm dealing with, however you want to define that problem, whether it's trying to get to Georgia for the holidays or Andy talking about finance or something like that. But in my mind, I almost picture like here in Georgia, here in Florida, we have Metropolitan Ministries, which is they do food bank, and they help a lot of people, and they're wonderful, as well as Feeding Tampa Bay. Well, every year they build up a whole city tent in this big church parking lot, and that's where I will go and volunteer to do the stuff before Thanksgiving, and then they switch it over to do the toy drive as well as all the meals and stuff like that for people to go in and shop. And that rises out of a parking lot like a circus and disappears after Christmas. And I think of that's the analogy in my head of that app. It rises up, it serves, and it disappears again. And it may not come back, and it's not that big of a deal if you needed it again, but it doesn't need to hold the space in your phone either. So it's just, these are all things. I think this is something I think Siri, I have the iPhone 16 and, I have 8.1. I've been sort of using Siri and stuff, and it's not there yet. And I don't know what they're going to release further as far as like what Siri can do, but it's not an agent, right? Siri isn't capable of saying like, well, I know that information is spread out over 4 apps, so let me just go find it and I'll bring it back to you in one way, almost like a Perplexity, instead of reaching and searching the internet and giving me a ChatGPT like answer. Siri will go out to the apps, find the information and bring it back to me. But the only thing I'll see on my side is just a summary of whatever I needed. So I don't have to go to all the apps to figure that out. I just assume these things are coming, and that's almost like an on-demand experience as well. It's only for me, and it may arise, but it also may disappear if there's not a need for it after that. And if the coding is that fast, and to your point, Jimmy, I don't need to know how to code to be able to dive deeper into it. It just works. I think a lot of people will be using these on-demand apps. I think it'll just be normal, So, Carl, what do you think on this?
When you talk about the on-demand apps, I think most of us just want our problems to be solved, really, than anything. Do we want to build anything? If you can do something that can solve my problem, I don't care what it looks like. It just does it and works and fantastic, right? So that works. And I think I was doing the research on a future video I was doing, and I think there was a Forbes article a couple days ago about how HubSpot and Salesforce are saying AI agents are the new apps. Now, again, I don't think necessarily what they're building is necessarily an agent. Maybe it's an agent example to them, but I think it's more of it does specific tasks for you, which I always think it's a glorified automation. They just found out how to do it. I'm sure there's a lot of Make and Zapier experts who could probably recreate a lot of the stuff via some sort of insane multi of automation. But it's going to be fascinating how natural language enables us to create things. But then when will that be that we don't have to check it? I think that's the disconnect, because you can create things now, but you have to be knowledgeable to be able to check, let's say, your code, check the outputs. But if it actually just works, and again, you don't have to please everybody, just please yourself. Like, Is this working for me? Perfect. I don't care how it looks, or it looks in a way that's kind of works out. It really brings into question the like I don't know if it's SaaS or to many, the SaaS building licenses or software to many, because if we can all do it, how does that impact all the tools out there that are being created and being, $2, $3, and maybe people build those apps and we buy them, or it's so easy that we build them ourselves. So it'd be like 20 different calculator apps that we built for our specific needs.
Yeah, maybe.
And it's things like that I think is where people will get started, right? So build me a Trello board, but give it the ability that I can embed videos. So I don't just want the link, I want the preview of the video, right? So like that's a relatively simple concept. I don't know, it's simple to code, right? Like that may be a complicated process, but it's a relatively simple concept that's known. We know what a Trello board is. Like the AI is going to do this for you, knows what a Trello board is, what the functions are, and we know what video previews are. And the other piece of this, Andy, I understand what you say, but I'm not sure that people are trying to make apps that look like apps. I agree with Carl that we're just looking for something to solve our problem. If it's messy and ugly but does the thing, I'm good. Right? Like I'm good with it. I don't need it. I don't need a clean UI so much. I actually use Jupyter notebooks with Google Colab fairly often because again, I don't care if it's pretty. I don't even need to understand half the things that it's saying as it's running something, as long as what I'm getting on the back end is solving the problem that I want. And that actually may be one of the places, because there are a bunch of Colab notebooks that are built to solve specific problems. And it's already given you half of that. And you can make a Colab notebook look prettier, sort of. I mean, like it's code, right? So so pretty is still not like a really nice UI. But that may be a jumping off point. So this was solved in a Jupyter notebook. Can I take that and then move that into a custom app for me that does just a couple more pieces?
Yeah, so I like the idea of mini apps, and hopefully they don't require beautiful UI. I mean, there are a number of applications out there that are desirable expressly because they're so beautiful and easy to use, right? So easy to use is going to get easier and easier. Like usability is going to get easier as conversational AI is the main way of interacting with all of these apps that we've created. Let me give you an example of mini apps that are already being created using AI, and that's the custom GPT store and their counterparts in the other places. So I'll use the example of a very simple app that I use quite frequently, which is called Convert Anything. That's on the custom GPT store. And this is a thing that I need to solve every once in a while, which is, okay, I have a PDF. I want to change it into a Word document where, before I would have to go, okay, well, I don't have an easy way to do that. I don't have Acrobat and I don't want to pay Adobe for that. There's got to be a free application on the web. Somebody's built a web application that I can use to do that. But now custom GPT exists where I can give it any file of almost any file type and say, convert this to an X file type. Okay, insert your X there. And it'll do that magically. And that's a very simple application, but it does require a UI. I've got to be able to do a file upload, right? So it's a very simple UI. It's just a message box with a little click button there that I can use to add a file to it. But that's the limit of the UI that has to be developed for such a simple app. But there are other things that we might build that would require a better UI. So for example, we've talked on this show about the idea of collecting history, personal history over the course of time in order to create a chronicle about your life. Well, that's going to be a combination of me interacting with something that's recording a recollection, but it's also uploading photos or finding photos, giving it an instruction to go at my photo library and find photos like that. And all of those things require a little more thought about, what the user interface is in order to satisfy all the requirements of collecting history, personal history, up to and including, say, I want to ask Beth to contribute her recollection about a conversation we had that's important. So that means I've got to have it associated with some kind of communication channel, and the agent's got to use that to do that application. So user interface isn't always something that, is easy to dismiss, because there's all these different aspects to it. But of course, now the agents will understand all those things if you just simply describe that, hey, I want to host this application with these kinds of features. And it'll figure out what all the requirements are for that and what the UI requirements are.
So this actually brings up for me my dream apps. And those are ones that are built to interface with the voice, the lady wiretaps that we have in our houses, right? So the voice interface, like the Echo, like Google Home, those kinds of devices, because the voice interaction is built in. So if you build a new, I'll try not to say her name, but if you build a new skill for Alexa, excellent. You don't have to do the voice interaction. You just need to say what the wake words are. But then the function that it's going to do is just you writing that code, or you writing that script, or you writing natural interface when that comes, so that you could just say what you want it to do, and it's going to do that on the back end. That for me is really exciting, because we know that they are that they're not as useful as they could be, right? Like, you should be able to take dictation into a Google Doc. You should be able to post messages in Slack, right? The function is there, and somebody may have built that skill. I have not looked for it, but that kind of thing I think is very exciting in this context, because that looks to create a very functional, personalized solution that has been very complicated, that could be much easier now. So I'm gonna start posting Slack messages, and y'all will know that I.
Well, we can, while we have a pause here, we can bring in some of the comments. So Justin was saying earlier, whenever he hears API, he feels like a cash register. I get they need to make money, but I'm tired of being nickel and dimed for access to every cool AI platform. Yeah, I hear you, Justin. I think we all kind of feel that way. It's the way I feel sort of about, everybody was like, death to bundled cable packages, down with cable. And now you pay more for for your TV needs than you ever did with whatever that cable package in some cases, right? Because it's been decoupled, and now you're paying for, the one-off. And I've said this, I think, on the show before, but I host locally in my community, I host the Georgia Bulldogs football watch parties. And one game was only going to be on ESPN Plus, right? So now I had to, because I didn't trust that the bar was going to have it where we hosted. And so, you have to pay that $11 for 1 month to show one game, because that's the only place you can now find it, And so I think I agree with you, Justin, that it can get a little much with the APIs. I do think that is going to get simplified over time as well. I don't really know exactly what that's going to look like, but if we just follow along and extrapolate on our ideas here today, I think whether it's an agent, whether it's a Siri, whether it's a whatever, there's going to be these calls out. And I don't know that we'll necessarily see the nickel and dime for it. I don't know if that's necessarily better, by the way, because it'll be coupled together. I mean, you look at a tool like Cassidy or whatever, great at what it does for sales and building things together, but they'll just charge you a fee versus knowing exactly what went out to it, because they're providing you a service and an easy UI that you can just kind of use on the surface, but you don't really pay for it that way. So I do wonder whether these things will go from right now, we feel like, oh, we're being nickeled and dimed, but they'll probably be absorbed back in a way that we pay one central fee for a service to build it, and we won't really see that on the back end. And again, that actually may end up being more expensive. I'm not saying it's necessarily better for the consumer. We just probably won't feel it as much. I've noticed, Andy, you mentioned about tap to pay. And also now you don't always automatically get a receipt. And I've noticed that, Publix is my local grocery store here. And I noticed at Publix too, that I don't look as much at the screen anymore because there's not as much human interaction, and so it eases the burden because I'm not seeing well, I'll tell you exactly. Yesterday, I paid $8 for grapes. I did not want to pay $8 for grapes, but I picked the wrong grapes and I didn't realize I had 2 pounds in my hand, and then I paid $8 for grapes. But like these things, a lot of times, because we don't really see it anymore, kind of gets absorbed in, and it's like, oh, just tap to pay. And then, do you want a receipt? Not really. I mean, it was all food. I know what I paid. I'll see it on my, like you said, Andy, I'll see it on my finance thing, and I'll put the bill, I line of mine in there, but I'm not really going to see the broken out anymore. So am I going to every time, am I going to catch that I paid too much, like double what I should have paid for grapes? Probably not. I'm probably going to miss it more than I see it. So I know I'm pontificating one over there, but I'm just curious what you guys think on that. Based on Justin's comment about the APIs, is it going to get bundled back together? Is it basically going to go back to cable? And then we're going to say death to cable, and then it's going to break up again.
Well,
and we're just going to keep
well,
going.
in technology, we totally see cycles.
Yeah.
If people get sick of one way, it'll go to another and then come back to it. Just like the whole client server terminals. Oh, look, computers that just plug into the server and everything's done on the server versus, oh, I have my own machine. I can do everything there. It's that same kind of thing. What I'd like to see, at least in the interim of the cycle, Justin, is that we have thresholds. Like, I got ChatGPT Plus. Until I hit a certain threshold, I really don't want to pay any additional for using API access because I pay my monthly. So, and it doesn't even have to be that high, right? If I'm just doing some testing, why do I need to have a whole separate process for that and a whole separate pool of funds for that? I pay my $20 a month. So why don't I can use half of that? Or, I mean, it's supposed to be inclusive. That's why it's a single pricing. So I'd love to see thresholds. So maybe half of what I pay for ChatGPT can be accessible by the API. And then after that, it requires additional costs. I don't know. But I think that would help a lot in the adoption of then I can pick up Claude as well, or I can pick up, Copilot or whatever of all these services, because I know that if I'm going to do testing on the playground or testing with the APIs or, use Make to create an automation or whatnot, I can at least test it out, run it for a bit, and then realize, oh, okay, that's going to cost me X amount every month. So I need to dial it back or something like that. So OpenAI, throw in a few API calls a month for ChatGPT Plus. Just saying. Thanks.
There's one thing that I want to point out here, though, is that we've seen the cost of these things decrease. And I think from every single major person or thought leader in the space is that the cost of intelligence will continue to decrease as we either get better systems, more compute or inference or anything that helps. And we've seen that, though, over the past 2-3 years, where, let's say, even the cost of GPT 3.5 has significantly decreased, right? You're starting to see. So will it actually cost anything? Because there's some thoughts out there that intelligence will be literally free or very close to it when we're either building out or using the tools. So curious to see over the next 2 years how that decreases over time too, because I think GPT-4 was pretty expensive, but then 4.0 half that, then they decreased the pricing. I'm not sure the pricing for 01 or 01 mini, but you're going to have to believe in the next year or two that'll be halved or decreased as well.
Yeah, 01 is pretty expensive, but it's also only available to people who were already paying a ton of money. So perhaps that's like
Yeah, I mean, it's still
matching.
needed,
Yeah. Yeah, you had to be a tier 5 developer to use I think you still do, in order to use the O1 preview API.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, I think we'll end it there for today. This is going to be a topic that continues to come up over time as we see new advancements in what some of these, either the reasoning apps can do, like O1, and where that continues to grow to, but also advancements on true agentic workflows and stuff. And yes, Salesforce, not just Salesforce, so many others have thrown the term agent on it, and that isn't kind of causing its own problems, because are they just automations? They seem like automations. Like, it seems like the same thing I can build and make, but I wouldn't call that an agent. So there's a lot of that as well. But I definitely see a near future where this on-demand idea of build it up specifically for me, Andy's solution, what you've been talking about, Jimmy and Carl and Beth, I definitely see that coming. Okay, let's talk about what we have coming up this week, because it's kind of a cool week. It ends on a really cool milestone for us. On Friday, it's actually our 300th show. But before we get to Friday, let me tell you what we have coming up the rest of the week. Tomorrow, if you like the idea, the concept of digital twins, if you like the idea of the virtual world and what companies are building, and this Project Sid, which we'll talk about tomorrow, it's kind of a cool name, Project Sid. What does that mean? And then what other companies are doing with building virtual environments or digital twins and these kind of things, and how that impacts business. Really, really cool conversation. That's coming up tomorrow. Wednesday, we'll have the news. Thursday, another cool conversation that we purposely put towards the end of the week because we knew Andy was coming back, and we didn't want him to be jet lagged talking about RAG systems. But there's a company called, the product is called Llama Cloud, and they have built a multimodal RAG system. What does that mean? Well, that means now when you can go and peer into the database, it can just as easily pull back graphs and charts from a lengthy PDF, as well as pulling back just text. That's a big deal. So we're going to talk all about that on Thursday. And then, as I said, coming back to the top, Friday is our 300 show. Now, we're not going to do a retrospective or anything like that, talking about that. We'll leave that to more of our anniversaries and stuff. But what we want to do instead is look forward, but not too far forward. We want to actually just look into Q4, which is coming up in just a few days. So what are our AI predictions for just Q4? We got a lot of weird things out there. Are we going to see a GPT next, or Orion, or what 5, or whatever name you want to put on it? Is Google going to surprise us with something new? Alexa and Amazon have been, or Amazon rather, with Alexa and things like that, have been sort of talking in the background. Meta obviously is doing things. What is X going to do? I knew I said it too loud. She's in the background talking. I knew I said her name too loud. So what is X going to do with their, they're going to build 3 times larger data centers? What is Microsoft going to do? They just signed a 20-year lease to restart 3 Mile Island. Microsoft did a 20-year lease. We'll talk about that on Wednesday, I'm sure. So when we look at just the next quarter, what are these big AI stories and news, and what do we expect to see before we get to New Year's of this year? So that'll be a really cool show on Friday. And it also happens to be our 300th show. So I think it's a really fun one to do it. So be sure you come back all week for all those interesting topics. Don't forget, you can always go over to thedailyishow.com. On that website, you can not only find information about where to stream our show, whether maybe you watch it on YouTube, but you prefer to listen to it on the car ride in Spotify, you can do that. And where you can see past shows. You could also sign up for our newsletter. Our 15th edition went out yesterday. I say this every week, but it's the one I'm most proud of. We actually got some feedback from our community, and I made some updates to it. So hopefully it's even better than it was last week, and we'll continue to make improvements along the way. It's free. It goes out every Sunday. It's a longer read. It's like sit back, drink your coffee, and dive in a little bit and nerd out with us on the AI side of things. So if you love that, go sign up for that newsletter. The list is growing, the subscription growing week over week. So that's all the stuff from me and everybody else. Till tomorrow, we'll say goodbye, but don't forget to come back and hang out all week. Thanks everybody. Thanks everybody in the comments, and we will see you tomorrow.
Aloha.